Coach Jude and good day classmates. My topic in this video is about psychoanalytic and psychosexual theory of Sigmund Freud. Cognitive theory by Jean Piaget.
Sigmund Freud, 1856-1939, Jewish background, though about 80s, lived in Vienna until Nazi occupation in 1938, had a medical background, wanted to do neurophysiologic research, private practice in nervous and brain disorders. Freud named the level of consciousness unconscious, conscious, and preconscious, not in much use now. Freud developed a topography of the self, id, ego, and superego. Freud also posited that human behavior was built up over time through distinct stages. Freudian stages were oral, anal, oedipal, latency, genital. Observation of infant revealed to him the preoccupation with feeding, nurturance, excretion, and toilet training. Discovery of genitals and sensation from erogenous zones. The three levels of awareness: conscious, preconscious, and conscious. When we say conscious, it is the current contents of your mind that you actively think of, what we call working memory, easily accessed all the time. When we say preconscious, it is the content of the mind you are not currently aware of. The thoughts, memories, knowledge, wishes, feelings available for easy access when you need it. And conscious, content kept out of conscious awareness, not accessible at all. Process that actively keep these thoughts from awareness. Freudian components of personality: id, ego, superego. Id means resides completely at the unconscious level, acts under the pleasure principle, immediate gratification, not willing to compromise, generates all of the personality's energy. Ego resides in all levels of awareness, operates under reality principle, attempts negotiations between id and superego to satisfy both realistically. Superego, the moralist and idealistic part of personality, resides in preconscious, operates on ideal principle, begins forming at 4 to 5 years of age, essentially your conscience. Ego, part of personality that mediates the demands of the id, the superego, and reality. The ego has no concept of right or wrong. Something is good simply if it achieves its end of satisfying without causing harm to itself or to the id. Superego, part of the mind that houses morals, values. Conscience can punish the ego through causing feelings of guilt or shame, reward us by feeling proud when we live up to it. Ego ideal, ultimate standards of behavior as a good members of society. The interaction of these three parts of ourselves is characterized by conflict. How does our mind develop? The psychosexual stages of development. Freud felt our development was driven by sexual energy or libido. At particular points in the developmental process, the single body part is particularly sensitive to the sexual erotic stimulation, and it is referred to as the erogenous zone. The child's libido centered on behavior affecting the primary erogenous zone of his age. He cannot focus on the primary erogenous zone of the next stage without resolving the developmental conflict of immediate one. Psychosexual development. Stages of development in which conflict over its impulses plays out. Ego must control these impulses. If not resolved, psychological issues can emerge later in life. A child, a given stage of development, has certain needs and demands. Either frustration or overindulgence results in fixation, where a person gets stuck in the stage. The method of obtaining satisfaction which characterize the stages one is fixated in will dominate and affect his adult personality. Oral stage, birth 18 months. Erogenous zone is the mouth and sucking and biting need to satisfaction, frustration, pessimism, envy, suspicion, and sarcasm. Overindulgence, optimistic, gullible, and is full of admiration for others around him. Primary conflict meaning derives the child of the sensory pleasures of nursing and of the psychological pleasure of being cared for mother and health.
Anal stage, 18 to 36 months. Obsession with the erogenous zone of the anus and with the retention or expulsion of the feces conflict with parent societal pressures. Anal explosive character, messy, disorganized, reckless, careless, and defiant. Anal retentive character, neat, precise, orderly, careful, stingy, withholding, obstinate, meticulous, and passive-aggressive. The resolution of the anal stage permanently affect the individual propensities of possession and attitudes towards authority. Phallic stage, 3 to 6 years. The phallic stage is the setting for the greatest, most crucial sexual conflict in Freud's model of development. In this stage, the child's erogenous zone is the genital region. The conflict, labeled the Oedipus complex, the Electra complex in woman, involves the child's unconscious desire to possess opposite sex parent and to eliminate the same-sex one. Employs the defense mechanism of identification, becoming as much like the same-sex parents as possible, indoctrinating them into their appropriate sexual role in life. A lasting trace of the Oedipal conflict is the superego. Fixation at the phallic stage develops a phallic character who is reckless, resolute, self-assured, and narcissistic, exclusively vain and proud. Failure to resolve the conflict can also cause a person to be afraid or incapable of close love. Freud also postulated fixation could be a root cause of homosexuality. Latency period, a period in which the sexual drive lies dormant. During the latency period, children parties express vital energy into a sexual pursuit such as school, athletics, and same-sex friendships. Genital stage. Child's energy once again focuses on his genitals. Interest turns to heterosexual relationships. The less energy the child has left invested in unresolved psychosexual developments, the greater his capacity will be to develop normal relationship with the opposite sex. Freud's psychosexual stage. Oral, 0 to 18 months. Pleasure centered on the mouth, sucking, chewing, biting. Anal, 18 to 36 months. Pleasure focuses on the bowel and bladder eliminations, coping with the demands for control. Phallic, 3 to 6 years. Pleasure zones is the genitals, coping with incestuous sexual feelings. Latency, 6 to puberty. Dominant sexual feeling, genital, puberty on maturation of sexual interest. Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Jean Piaget, 1896-1980. History. Born August 9, 1896 in Switzerland. Death September 16, 1980 at the age of 84. Parents, Adlet, son of Arthur Piaget and Rebecca Jackson. Education received from the University of New Channel in 1918. Wife married to Valentin Chanini in 1923. Children, 3 children, namely Jacqueline, Lucian, and Laurent, whose intellectual development from infancy to language was studied by Piaget. The sensory motor stage, birth 2 years. Infancy. Infants construct an understanding of the world by coordinating sensory experiences, seeing, hearing, with motor action, reaching, touching. Develop objects' permanence. Memory. Realize that the objects exist even if they are out of sight. Infants progress from reflexive, instinctual action of birth to the beginning of problem solving. Intellectual. The symbolic abilities, language, toward the end of this stage. Pre-operational stage, 2 to 7 years old, toddler and early childhood. This stage begins when the child starts to use symbol and language. This is a period of developing language and concept, so the child is capable of more complex mental representation, that is words and images. He is still unavailable to use operations, that is logical mental rules such as rules of arithmetic. This stage is further divided into two sub-stage. Number 1, pre-conceptual stage, 2 to 4 years old. Increased use of verbal representation, but speech is echo-centric. The child uses symbols to stand for action. A toy doll stands for the real baby, or the child role plays mommy or daddy. Second, intuitive stage, 4 to 7 years old. Speech becomes more social, less echo-centric. Here, the child base their knowledge on what they feel or sense to be true, yet they cannot explain the underlying principles behind what they feel or sense. Concrete operational stage, 7 to 12 years old, childhood and early adolescence. The concrete operational stage is characterized by the appropriate use of logic. Important processes during this stage are seriation, the ability to sort objects in an order according to size, shape, or any order characteristic. For example, if given different size objects, they may place them accordingly. Transitive, the ability to recognize logical relationships among elements in a serial order. For example, if A is taller than B and B is taller than C, then A must be taller than C. Classification, the ability to group objects together on the basis of common features. The child also begins to get the idea that one set can include another. For example, there is a class of objects called dogs. There is also a class called animals, but all dogs are also animals, so the class of animals includes that of dogs. The centering, the ability to take multiple aspects of a situation into account. For example, the child will no longer perceive an exceptionally wide but short cup to contain less than a normally wide taller cup. Reversibility. The child understands that numbers or objects can be changed, then return to the original states. For example, the child will rapidly determine that if 4 plus 4 is equals 8, then 8 minus 4 is equals 4, the original quantity. Conservation, understanding that the quantity, length, or number of items is unrelated to the arrangement or appearance of the objects or item. Eliminations of egocentrism, the ability to view things from another's perspective. The child performs operations combining, separating, multiplying, repeating, divided, and etc. Formal operational stage, 12 years and above, adolescence and adulthood. The thought becomes increasingly flexible and abstract, that is, can carry out systematic experiments. The ability to systematically solve a problem in a logic and methodological way. Understands that nothing is absolute, everything is relative. Develop skills such as logic, thought, deductive reasoning, as well as inductive reasoning and systematic planning, and etc. Understand that the rules of any game or social system are developed by a man by mutual agreement and hence could be changed or modified. The child's way of thinking is at its most advanced, although the knowledge it is has to work with will change. Educational implications emphasize on discovery approach in learning. Curriculum should provide specific educational experience based on children's developmental level. Arrange classroom activities so that they assist and encourage self-learning. Social interaction have a great educational value for Piaget. Positive social action therefore should be encouraged. Instruction should be geared to the level of the child. As the level of the child changes at each stage, the level of instruction or exploratory activity should also change. Simple to complex and project method of teaching. Co-curriculum activities have equal importance as that if curricular experiences in the cognitive development of children. Major goals of education according to Piaget are critical and creative thinking. Contribution to education. Piaget's theory help educators, parents, and investigators to comprehend the capacity of children in their different stages. He made us conscious with the way children and adults thinking. A lot of school programs have been redesigned, taking as base Piaget's discoveries. Piaget made a revolution with the developmental psychology, concentrating all his attention to the mental process and his role with behavior.
Good evening, Coach. Good evening, classmates. My name is James Vincent Bertuazon, and the topics that I'm about to discuss is about psychosocial theory development by Erik Erikson and the socio-cultural theory by Lev Vygotsky. Stage 1. Trust versus mistrust. Age between birth to 18 months. Conflict, trust versus mistrust. Relationship, mother. Strength is hopes. Question: can I trust the world? Key event is feeding. So, children are completely dependent on others. Trust is established when babies given adequate warmth, touching, love, and physical care, dependable and reliable. So, mistrust is caused by inadequate or unpredictable care and by cold, indifferent, and rejecting parents, which is undependable, unpredictable, and dangerous as well. So, stage 2 of autonomy versus shame and doubt. Between ages of 18 months to 3 years. Relationship, parents. Strength is will. So, question is it okay to be me? So, autonomy is by doing things for themselves, such as body control and making choices, which is being secure and confident to ourselves. The negative side, which is shame, overprotective or ridiculing parents may cause children to doubt abilities and feel shameful about their actions, in which turns into inadequacy and self-doubt. So, initiative versus guilt, which is stage 3. Age between 3 years to 6 years old. The relationship is family. Strength is purpose. The question is it okay for me to do, move, and act this way? So the key event is independence. Initiative is when parents reinforce via giving children freedom to play, use imagination, and ask questions. So the positive results in this or outcome is they tend to be creative and constructive in doing things. So the guilt, it may occur if parents criticize, prevent play, or discourage a child's questions. So you seem to tell them that they are always wrong and they tend to fail to explore the world. The initiative and guilt should be balanced in order to have moral judgment. Stage 4, industry and inferiority. So it comes between the age of 6 years old to 12 years old. And the relationship is neighbors and school. The strength is competence. So the question is, can I make it in the world of people and things? The key event is school. So children have to cope with new social and academic demands. Industry occurs when child is praised for productive activities such as painting and building. Sense of competence. Inferiority is or occurs if child's efforts are regarded as messy or inadequate. Weak sense of self and incapable to take responsibility. So basically, the child loses its confidence in doing things. Like he thinks that doing these things would lead him to trouble or lead him to shame. Stage 5. Identity versus role confusion. Between the ages of 12 years old to 18 years old. Relationship, peers, and role model. So the strength is fidelity. Question is, who am I and what can I be? Key event is peer relationships. So children learn a number of different roles. Identity. One's organization of individual drives, abilities, beliefs, and experience into consistent image of self. So basically, who we are. So role confusion. Failure to establish an individual identity separate from the family, having no peer relationships and plans for an occupation. Ego diffusion. Diffusion, I mean. Stage 6, intimacy versus isolation. Start of families. So it starts between the age of 19 years to 40 years old. So the relationship is between friends and partners. So strength is love. The question is, can I love? And the key event is love relationships. So, as what I've said earlier, start of families. Intimacy, ability to care about others and to share experiences with them. Strong relationship. The outcome would be that. Isolation, feeling alone and uncared for in life. Loneliness would turn into that. Stage 7, generativity versus stagnation. Age to 40 years to 65 years old. So relationship is household or workmates. And the strengths is care. And strength is care. Question, can I make my life count? Key event is parenting. So primary developmental task is one of the contributing to society and helping to guide future generations. So generativity interest in guiding the next generation, which is social involvement and parenting. Stagnation is when one is only concerned with one's own needs and comforts. Material possession, physical well being, and non productive, also meaning you're being selfish. So, stage 8, integrity versus despair. Ages between 65 years to death. The relationship is mankind, mankind. Strength is wisdom. We seem to have a lot of that when we reach that age or when we mature. So, question, is it okay to have been me? So, key event is reflecting on the acceptance of one's life. In the last stages of life, individuals look back over their lives and judge them. Integrity. Self-respect developed when people have lived richly and responsibility, meaning we acquired all the wisdom that satisfies our heart, feeling of wisdom and meaning, being able to satisfy ourselves with the wisdom that we richly gathered. Despair occurs when previous life events are viewed with regret. Experiences heartache and remorse. Basically, regret and bitterness, more or less hatred in life, hating someone. So, Erickson's psychosocial development is infancy, early childhood, preschool, middle childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle age, and old age. And the psychosocial crisis is trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative and versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair. Social Cultural Theory by Lev Vygotsky. Lev Vygotsky was a seminal Russian psychologist, best known for his sociocultural theory and zone of proximal development. He was born in the town of Orsha, Russian Empire, also known as Belarus now, on November 19, 1896, and died on June 11, 1934, at the age of 37. He was from a middle-class Russian Jewish family. His father was a banker. He was raised in the city of Gomel, Belarus, where he obtained both public and private education. So, in 1913, he was admitted to the Moscow State University through a Jewish lottery. There, he studied law, and in parallel, he attended lectures at fully official, but privately funded non-degree, granting Moscow City People's University. His early interests were in arts, and he might have aspired to be a literary critic, fascinated with the formalism of his time. His main work was in developmental psychology. He proposed a theory of the development of higher cognitive functions in children that saw reasoning as emergent through practical activity in a social environment. Sociocultural theory referred to the roles of the factors such as ethnicity and gender in behavior and mental processes. Vygotsky's sociocultural theory in 1978 focuses on the ways in which children's cognitive development is influenced by the cultures in which they are reared and the people who teach them. Focuses more on the transmission of the information and cognitive skills from generation to generation. The transmission skills involves teaching and learning. But Vygotsky did not view learning as a mechanical process that can be described in terms of conditioning. Rather, he focused more generally on how the child's social interaction with adults, largely in home, organized a child's learning experiences in such a way that the child can obtain cognitive skills, such as computation or reading skills, and use them to acquire information. Vygotsky saw the child's functioning as adaptive, and the child adapts to his or her social and cultural interactions. In Vygotsky's theory, teachers and parents provide children with problem solving methods that serve as cognitive scaffolding, while the child gains the ability to function independently. Piaget's focus was largely maturational. It was assumed that maturation of the brain allowed the child to experience new levels of insights and suddenly develop new kinds of problem solving. Vygotsky focused on the processes in the teacher-learner relationship. Cognitive development was about culture and social interaction. So, scaffold, a temporary skeletal structure that enables workers to fabricate a building, bridge, or other permanent structures. Cognitive scaffolding refers to temporary support provided by a parent or teacher to a child who is learning to perform a task. The amount of guidance decreases as the child becomes more skilled and self-efficient. When learning with others, the child tends to internalize or bring inward the conversations and explanations that help him or her gain skills. Children not only learn the meaning of the words from teachers but also learn the ways of talking to themselves about solving problems within a cultural context. Outer speech becomes inner speech. What was the teacher's becomes the child's. What was a social and cultural context becomes embedded within child. Social culture theory. Vygotsky sees the ZPD as the area where the most sensitive instruction or guidance should be given, allowing the child to develop skills they will then use their own, developing higher mental functions. He also views interaction with peers as an effective way of developing skills and strategies. He suggests that teachers use corporate learning exercise where less competent children develop with help from more skillful peers. Within the zone of proximal development, in short. Key concepts in Vygotsky's theory. Zone of proximal development and scaffolding. Proximal means nearby or close, as in the words approximate and proximity, or proximity. Zone of proximal development, or ZPD, refers to a range of tasks that the children can carry out with the help of someone who is more skilled. The zone refers to the relationship between the child's abilities and what she or he can do with help from others. Adults or older children best guide the children through this zone by gearing their assistance to the child's capabilities. Vygotsky's theory differs from that of Piaget's in a number of important ways. Vygotsky's places more emphasis on culture affecting cognitive development. This contradicts with Piaget's view of universal stages and content of development. Hence, Vygotsky assumes cognitive development varies across cultures, whereas Piaget states cognitive development is mostly universal across cultures. Vygotsky places considerably more emphasis on social factors contributing to cognitive development. Vygotsky states cognitive development stems from social interactions and from guided learning within the zone of proximal development, as children and their partners co-construct knowledge in contrast. Piaget's maintain that cognitive development stems largely from independent explorations. Vygotsky's places more and different emphasis on the role of language in cognitive development that results form and internalization of language. According to Vygotsky, adults are an important source for cognitive development. Adults transmit their cultural tools of intellectual adaptation that children internalize. In contrast, Piaget emphasizes the importance of the peers as peer. Interaction promotes social perspective taking. According to Piaget, language depends on thought for its development. In example, thought comes before language. For Vygotsky, thought and language are initially separate systems from beginning of life, merging at around 3 years of age, producing verbal thought, which is the inner speech.
Hi everyone, I am Canadian Buenaventura Agabon, a first year college student of CPPSU. The topic that given to me is about ecological system theory of Yuri Bronfenbrenner and the classical conditioning of Ivan Pavlov.
So Yuri Bronfenbrenner, born in April 29, 1917 and died on September 25, 2005. He was an American developmental psychologist but born in the Soviet Union, who is most known for his ecological system theory of child development. Bronfenbrenner's research and his story was the key in changing the perspective of developmental psychology by calling attention to the large number of environmental and societal influences on the child development. Bronfenbrenner saw the process of human development as being shaped by the interaction between an individual and his or her environment. During his time, he saw developmental psychology as only studying individual influences on development in unnatural settings. In his own words, developmental psychology was the science of strange behavior of children in strange situations with strange adults for the briefest possible periods of time. His story states that there are many different levels of environmental influences that can affect a child's development, starting from people and institutions immediately surrounding the individual to nationwide cultural forces. He eventually renamed his story the bioecological model in order to recognize the importance of biological processes in development. According to Melvin L. Kohn, a sociologist from Johns Hopkins University, Bronfenbrenner was critical in making social scientists realize that interpersonal relationships, even at the smallest level of parent-child relationship, did not exist in a social vacuum but were embedded in the larger social structures of community, society, economics, and politics. Microsystem refers to the institutions and groups that most immediately and directly impact the child's development, including family, school, religions, institutions, neighborhood, and peers. It focuses on the development of every child's progress. These groups and institutions are the source of their development as a child. Mesosystem. Interconnections between the microsystems. Interconnections between the family and teachers. Relationship between the child's peers and the family. Because mesosystem is the interaction of child's source of development. Exosystem involves link between a social setting in which the individual does not have an active role and the individual's immediate context. This can refer as introvert individual that are not actually active when it comes on socializing. Macro system describe the culture in which individuals live. It refers on the cultures of every individual where they live in. Chrono system, the patterning of environmental events and transitions over the life course, as well as socio-historical circumstances. This system is referred to the particular events that can change the behavior of every child's development. My second topic is about Pavlov's classical conditioning. So, who is Pavlov? Ian Pavlov was a famous Russian psychologist. He lived from 1849 to 1936. He made many discoveries in the psychology field. Pavlov won the Nobel Prize in Psychology in 1904. What is classical conditioning? Classical conditioning, a learned reflex response that you do when evoked by stimulus. Pavlov performed experiments with dogs on to collect saliva. He noticed that the dogs would salivate when powdered meat was present. Pavlov associated the ringing of a bell with the presence of powdered meat. He rang the bell every time the dogs were served food. Pavlov started ringing the bell and the dogs would salivate without the powdered meat being present, thus a learned reflex. In the classroom, teachers can use classical conditioning to quiet down the students. Example, first day of class, students walk into class and teacher sits at desk. Teacher goes towards board when ready to teach and children quiet down. Second day of class, students are chatty when the teacher goes to the board. Teacher asks to be quiet. Third day of class, students are automatically quiet when the teacher walks to the board. Another example, first day of class, the teacher turns on the projector to do their lesson and students quiet down. Second day of class, the students are still chatty when the projector turns on. The teacher must ask them to quiet down. Third day of class, the student quiet down when the projector is turned on. In the classroom, students will be conditioned in a positive manner. Students will learn the expectations of their teachers. Students will learn the expectations of their school.
Good day, Coach Jude, and good day, classmates. I am Franzel D. Alfaro. So for today, I'll be discussing about my topics. These are the operant conditioning by B.F. Skinner and the multiple intelligence theory by Howard Gardner. So B.F. Skinner, or Burrus Frederick, he was born on March 20, 1904, and he died on August 18, 1990. He is an American psychologist, behaviorist, inventor, author, and social philosopher. And he was the Edgar Pierce Professor of Psychology at Harvard University from 1958 to 1974. The operant conditioning has three major types of learning. These are the learning by association, or classical conditioning, learning by consequences, or operant conditioning, and learning through modeling or observational learning. So operant conditioning, it is the type of learning in which behaviors are emitted to earn rewards or avoid punishment. And the examples of operant conditioning, if you give your child treat after she sits quietly at the table, she is likely to sit quietly at the table again next time. And Howard Gardner, he was born on July 11, 1943 in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Inspired by Jean Piaget to study developmental psychology, almost of all his post-secondary life has been spent at Harvard University. He developed his theory while working with both gifted children and those with severe brain injury. His theory was first articulated when he published his first book, Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences, in 1983. So there are many types of multiple intelligences. These are the logical mathematical intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, linguistic intelligence, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, visual spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, naturalist intelligence, and existential intelligence. So the logical mathematical intelligence is the ability to explore patterns, categories, and relationships by manipulating objects or symbols and to experiment in a controlled, orderly way. It is also the ability to reason either deductively or inductively and to recognize and manipulate abstract patterns and relationships. Interpersonal intelligence, it is the ability to gain access to understand one's inner feelings, dreams, and ideas. Personal knowledge turned inward to the self. This form of intellect entails the ability to understand one's own emotion, goals, and intention. Linguistic intelligence, it is the ability to use language to excite, please, convince, stimulate, or convey information. Interpersonal intelligence, it is the ability to understand other people, to notice their goals, motivations, intentions, and to work effectively with them. And it empathizes with others, observe and understand others' mood, feelings, and temperament. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence, it is also the ability to use fine and gross motor skills in sports, the performing arts, or arts and crafts production. Bodily intelligence involves using the body to solve problems, to create products, and to convey ideas and emotion. Visual spatial intelligence, it is the ability to perceive and to mentally manipulate a form or object and to perceive and create tension, balance, and composition in a visual or spatial display. Musical intelligence, it is the ability to enjoy, perform, or compose a musical piece. Natural intelligence, it is the ability to recognize flora and fauna, communion with the natural world and its phenomena. Existential intelligence, it is concerned with the inner life of mind and spirit and its relationship to being in the world. Conclusion. Multiple intelligence as a diagnostic tool. Ask, how are you smart rather than how smart are you? Helps teachers see how students learn. No competition and does not injure the child. So what is multiple intelligence? The theory of multiple intelligences is Howard Gardner's theory that proposes that people are not born with all of the intelligence they will ever have. It says that everyone is intelligent in at least 9 in different ways and can develop each aspect of intelligence to an average level of competency. Intelligence, as defined by Gardner, it is the ability to solve problems that are valuable in one or more cultural settings. What is this theory? Breakdowns in different intelligences to categorize talents and skills. Gardner, the kinds of intelligence would allow different ways to teach rather than one.
So, good day everyone, especially Coach Jude. I am Felicity Hajula Patel. So today, I'm the one who test to report or to discuss about metacognitive by John Flavel and laws of learning by Edward Thorndike.
Metacognition. The term metacognition was coined by John Flavel. According to John Flavel, in 1979 to 1987, metacognition consists of both metacognitive knowledge and metacognitive experiences or regulation. So when we talk about metacognition, it is thinking about thinking or learning how to learn. Metacognition refers to a higher order thinking which involves active awareness and control over the cognitive processes engaged in learning. So we have metacognitive knowledge. So it is safer to acquire knowledge about cognitive processes, knowledge that can be used to control cognitive processes. So we have three categories of metacognitive knowledge, which is the person variables, task variables, and strategy variables. So, person variables includes how one views himself as a learner and thinker. It is a knowledge of person. Variables refer to knowledge about how human beings learn and process information, as well as individual knowledge of one's own learning processes. Task variables includes knowledge about the nature of the task as well as the type of processing demands that it will place upon individual. And it is about knowing what exactly needs to be accomplished, gauging it is difficult, and knowing the kind of effort it will demand. Task variables includes knowledge about the nature of the task as well as the type of processing demands that it will place upon individual. And it is about knowing what exactly needs to be accomplished, gauging it is difficult, and knowing the kind of effort it will demand. OMRUD includes the following in the practices of metacognition: knowing the limits of one's own learning and memory capacities, knowing what learning tasks one can realistically accomplish within certain amount of time, knowing which learning strategies are effective and which are not, planning an approach to learning tasks that is likely to be successful, using effective learning strategies to process and learning new material, monitoring one's own knowledge and comprehension. In other words, knowing when information has been successfully learned and when it's not, using effective strategies for retrieval of previous stored information. Knowledge is said to be metacognitive if it is kindly used in a purposeful manner to ensure that a goal is met. Humer believes that metacognition includes the ability to ask and answer the following types of questions. What did I know about this subject, topic, issue? Do I know what I need to do now? Do I know where I can go to get some information, knowledge? How much time will I need to learn this? What are some strategies and tactics that I can use to learn this? Did I understand what I just heard, read, or saw? How will I know if I am learning at an appropriate rate? How can I spot an error if I make one? How should I revise my plan if it is not working to my expectation satisfaction? Metacognition development. Researchers such as that of Fang and Cox showed that metacognitive awareness was evident in preschoolers and students as young as 8 years old. Children already may have the capacity to be more aware and reflective of their own learning. However, not may have been taught and encouraged to apply metacognition. So we have teaching strategies to develop metacognition. Have students monitor their own learning and thinking. Have students learn study strategies. Have students make prediction about information to be presented next based on what they have read. Have students relate ideas to existing knowledge structures. Have students develop question, ask questions of themselves about what's going on around them, help students to know when to ask for help, show students how to transfer knowledge, attitudes, values, skills to other situations or tasks. Novice and expert learners. In the last 20 years, cognitive psychologists have studied the distinction among learners in the manner they observe or process information. They were able to differentiate expert learners from novice learners. A very important factor that separates these two types of learners mentioned is metacognition. Expert learners employed metacognitive strategies in learning. They were more aware of their learning process as they read, studied, and did problem solving. Expert learners monitored their learning and consequently adjusted their strategies to make learning more effective. Educational implications. The teacher should arouse curiosity for learning so that the pupil feel ready to imbibe the new experiences. The teacher should, before taking up the new lesson, arouse the interest and desire of the student to learn. Law of exercise. Things are most often repeated are best remembered. Law of use and disuse. Law of use. The learning and strength with repeated trial or practice. Law of disuse. Learning are weak when trial or practice is discontinued. Educational implication. The teacher should provide different opportunities for learners to practice or repeat the task. Recall, manual, drill, review, and etc. The teacher should have constant practice in what has once been learned. Delayed use or long disuse may cause forgetfulness. Law of effect. Learning is strength when it is accompanied by a pleasant or satisfying feeling. Learning is weak when it is associated with an unpleasant feeling. The emotional state of the learner affects the learning. Educational implications. As a failure is accompanied by discouraging emotional state, it should be avoided. Reward and recognition play a great role in encouraging the pupil. Punishment should be avoided as far as possible. Punishment produces a negative effect and it causes discouragement. Secondary laws of learning. Law of primacy. Learning that takes place in the beginning is the best and lasting. Learning should be done correctly for the first time since it is difficult to unlearn or change an incorrectly learned material. Educational implications. The learning on the first day is most vivid and strong. The teacher also should be most serious on the first day of teaching. For the instructors, this means that what they teach the first time must be correct. It is more difficult to unteach a subject than to teach it correctly the first time. Law of recency. Things must recently learned are best remembered, while the things learned some time ago are remembered with more difficulty. Frequent review and summarization help fix in the mind the material covered. Educational implications. Instructors recognize the law of recency when they plan a lesson, summary, or a conclusion of the lecture. Repeat, restate, or re-emphasize important matters at the end of a lesson to make sure that learners remember them instead of inconsequential details. Law of intensity. The law of intensity states that if the stimulus experience is real, the more likely there is to be a change in behavior learning. A vivid, dramatic, or exciting learning experience teaches more than routine or boring experience. Educational implication. A learner will learn more from the real thing than from a substitute. Demonstrations, skits, and models do much to intensify the learning experiences of learners. Subordinate laws of learning. Law of multiple response. Confronted with a new situation, the learner responds in a variety of ways, arriving at the correct response. Trial and error. If the individual wants to solve a puzzle, he is to try in different ways rather than mechanically persisting in the same way. Law of set attitude. Learning is guided by a total set or attitude of the learner, which determines not only what the learner will do but what will satisfy him or her. The learner performs the task well if he has his attitude set in the task. Law of analogy and assimilation. According to this law, the individual makes use of old experiences or acquisitions while learning a new situation. There is a tendency to utilize common elements in the new situation as existed in the similar past situation. Law of associative shifting. According to this law, we may get a response of which a learner is capable, associated with any other situation to which he is sensitive. Sometimes, a reaction to a certain stimulus might shift to a different one. Pluripotency of elements. According to this law, the learner reacts selectively to the important in the situation and neglects the other features or elements which may be irrelevant.